now that they're both here, I'm going to allow Paula to introduce her speaker.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody, I'm Paula Parton, alcoholic. And I just could not be more honored to be asked to introduce my friend Carla. I mean, I just kind of show off that I'm her friend way more than I should. And I just am so proud to be in her sunlight. And I tell her this all the time, that she's the smartest person I know, and it's true. And I just listening to the reading that you were reading today, just now, and just so many of those words, man, are my friend Carla, just stability, and the outside stuff happens and it doesn't affect her inside. And I did just have a 12-hour ride with our mutual friend, Cindy, and we both were just praising her and just said, Carla's already got one foot in the fourth dimension. And just, you know, you guys are in for a freaking treat. So I'm going to give you my sweet friend, Carla. Thank you.
Oh my God, Paula, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Carla and I'm an alcoholic. And I would just like to stop the meeting right there and everybody go home. Let's just leave it there. Just, and see, I feel the same way. I feel my sobriety date, September 25th, 1987. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have old long-term friends. I didn't have those relationships. You know, I had my family, but they were stuck with me. You know, I was connected to them by, you know, default. And I just had no idea how to have a relationship. And the people that come into my life these days that I get to spend any amount of time with just amaze me. And I feel the same way about Paula. She's one of the smartest people I know. And 1 foot in, when they said I have 1 foot in the fourth dimension, I thought I've got 1 foot somewhere, but I'm not sure what we can call that. So, but I keep working on it. And thank you, Paula, for asking me to come do this. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's deep and wide, and yet it's something that to me is not separate from what we came here to do. You know, it's not emotional sobriety. Somewhere along the line, and maybe not so much anymore because we're putting our hands back on it and we're talking about it so much more, but I used to hear emotional sobriety being talked about as if it was like some additional thing we get. We come to Alcoholics Anonymous and then we go to emotional sobriety school, which is somewhere, some elusive place, when really for me and all that I can see in all of the literature that I have at my disposal here, that we have our disposal here in Alcoholics Anonymous, from the big book and the 12 and 12 and so many other things. It seems like we got on that road when we got here. I couldn't have emotional maturity or spiritual maturity until, I mean, alcoholism was the catalyst for my being able to have anything like that. But I was alive and even spiritually awake when I was born, and later on had used alcohol so much and so spiritually sick that in order for me to have anything like what we're talking about here, any spiritual equilibrium or any kind of emotional balance, I had to get sober first. But it wasn't separate. In getting sober then, and starting from page 19 in our big book, you know, the very description down at the very bottom of page 19, he says, most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. And then, so this is in the chapter, There is a Solution. And in the grand scheme of talking about what the problem really was for us in terms of Alcoholics Anonymous as a fellowship. Why am I here in Alcoholics Anonymous? First, dealing with our singleness of purpose, and then how to live. And I love that Bill talks about this in this essay, where he states that his duty is to come back out and become a citizen of the world, a citizen at large, not to huddle up and stay, we're just going to stay sober here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're all going to get better, and we're going to love each other, and we're going to be so much better than we were, and it's going to become us and them again. And so for me, this was actually a letter that he wrote in 1953, and it was published then in the Grapevine later on, of course, January 1958. And in this book, The Language of the Heart, which is one of my favorite books published by the Grapevine, is a collection of Bill's articles, but it comes right in sandwiched between an article called The Greatest Gift of All and then Take Step 11. And I thought it was really appropriate that because this letter really didn't exist in a vacuum. He wrote this letter to a friend, the letter that was just read, or to someone who was having trouble. But for me, it was just a reiteration of everything that we learn how to do when we get here, and how we deepen and widen our experience through the teaching and practice of these steps. We come in here and I surrender to what the overall problem was for me, which is alcohol. And I had to surrender. I had to concede that I'm powerless over alcohol, mind and body. I have this allergy of the body that happens when I'm drinking, and this obsession of the mind for alcohol that happens when I'm not. That's alcoholism as I understand and experienced it. And then when that got arrested somewhere along the line, somewhere about 9 months of sobriety for me, in the middle of making amends, all of a suddenly I realized I hadn't thought about taking a drink in a few days. That horrible obsession to drink alcohol had been lifted for me when it had been on me every single day, all the time. This horrible lullaby of rationalization just on me every day. And that somewhere that the mind still saying, is it an option? Is it an option? Is it an option? And I hear people still playing with that a little bit, and I couldn't shut that off. What you guys gave me was an alternate route. You rerouted me and you said, don't listen to that, do this. And so the process of admitting I was powerless over alcohol, mind and body, that there was a solution for me. Step 2, just be willing to let go of my old ideas about God. I didn't have to define or comprehend that power that I call God all these years later, not because of anything except that it describes that ineffable thing that happens that I know exists, that I still can't define or comprehend 34 years later, but I know has always existed. But for me, step 2 just meant maybe. And all these years later, when I take these steps over any other problem that's bothering me, it still means maybe. Maybe there's another way. I'm still open to maybe there's a new way. Step 3, the pre-third step stuff, pages 60 to 63 in the big book, describe again these hobbling dependencies he talks about in this letter. This letter is so much of a recap of living the steps, and a deepening and widening of the experience that we learn about in the beginning. And I'll say this before I forget, that somebody said, and I don't know if it's true or not, I haven't really, but it seems kind of true, is that in the first 30 days, I went to a lot of meetings. I exposed myself and immersed myself in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they said, you'll probably have heard about everything you'll ever need to know in the first 30 days of sobriety about how to stay sober forever. And then you'll spend the rest of your life remembering, or being reminded of that. So I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems to be that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so the third step stuff, pages 60 to 63, where it talks about what's standing in the way. It's not alcoholism itself, it's what activates the alcoholism. This bondage of self that I live in, this hobbling dependencies on things working out the way I think they're supposed to be, or what he called running the show, when things had to be my way. And if circumstances would only go this way or that way, if people would only do as I wish, and all of the gyrations that I would go through in trying to make that happen, where it says sometimes I'd be gracious in trying to seek my way. I'd come at you real kind. And then when you say, no, Carla, I'm sorry, we just can't make that happen. And then I'd be like, well, F you then. Who cares about what you think? And then turn on you like that, just whatever it took to get my way, until finally, getting so tired of trying to work it and run the show that you just say, oh, this is the problem. Here I am. I'm ready to stop. And in the beginning, I was just shown that was in the way of my being able to stop drinking. That was it. That was the beginning. And then later I find that it's a continued relinquishment of self. I know some people say, oh, there's a second surrender. Second, really? I've got about like a surrender a day, a continued surrender a day, and I don't have to succumb to every temptation to self that I have, but I've become aware of them. And maybe that's it now, is that they're just so much louder. I can see them. But I don't have to let them drive me anymore. So the third step, all I'm saying is, okay, I'm ready. I see the mess. I'm ready. I'm ready to have this, to do something about this. And then in the fourth step, I map out how that's showing up in me, how it showed up in me in the past. And it gives me some fodder for how I'm going into the present. What should I have done instead? And how would I sit in my skin? What would God have me be instead of fearful? Because by this time, what I've realized is that fear has been driving me. Yet again, hobbling demands that people or places or things be as I wish. And so I'm afraid of not getting my way, or afraid of losing something I already have. Really, it boiled down to that for me. I keep it that simple. Fear of not getting, fear of losing. And when I can see that, then I can more easily offer that back out to the elements, to the great God, to the great spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so I mapped that out, and then I shared that with my sponsor in step 5, and then in step 6 and 7, I love, that there are 2 paragraphs in the big book, but then there are 13 pages in the 12 and 12 on step 6 and 7, which is the ongoing, real fabric, the description, the laying out of really the makings of emotional sobriety, or the making of the lack of emotional sobriety sometimes. And I love that Father Dowling said in the beginning, anyone with enough willingness and honesty to try this step, he was talking about step 6, to try this step repeatedly, can say that they're on their way to, I'm not going to try, I'm paraphrasing, but can say that they're on their way. And so when he says, I'm going to try this step repeatedly, that means I'm going to have to do it again. I'm not going to get it right the first time. I'm going to have to revisit. Fear will revisit me, whether some things won't bother me anymore, but there'll be something, fear shows up in a new outfit, and I'll see that, and I'll have to, and I get to deal with fear at that. I don't have to be afraid of fear anymore, though. I can kind of welcome it. There's been room made in that. But the first time through these steps, it was pretty baffling. It was pretty like, what's going on here? And I had to walk a lot on faith. And mostly, I'm not even sure it was faith. It was more like they say, I didn't see the light, I felt the heat. That's really more of what was driving me. And I really didn't want to drink anymore, but I didn't know if this was going to be, comfortable or the way. I was just willing because there didn't seem to be any other way. And so step 6 and 7, they showed me though, and I got that this was going to be an ongoing thing, and I was willing to stay awake for it. I didn't like it. And thank God my old sponsor, Lee, is this big Jerry Garcia looking guy who would say things like, well, it's not a requirement to like everything you have to do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just a requirement that you do it. He'd say things like, well, that's going to feel a whole lot better as soon as it quits hurting, stuff like that. Real, spiritually profound stuff that I needed simple. I want to know how to live on this earth. I already have had my experience with living with my head in the clouds. And I was the kind of a drunk who slept by the side of the road and called it camping. I had no responsibility. I grew up, I left home young. I was locked up. I didn't have any experience really of being a responsible citizen at all. By the time I was 29, I had lost my daughter once and was getting ready to lose her again, homeless in and out. I just couldn't stand on my feet. So all of this practical stuff was useful to me. How to get up in the morning and go to work days in a row, like did it yesterday. Okay, cool. Let's do that again. Pay rent for more than a month in a row. All of that kind of stuff. And all of the fears that came in as a result of having to show up for that, then could be dealt with a day at a time. Oh boy, that helped me so much, and they used to give us the kicker right up front. They'd used to say in the meetings, go out tomorrow and do something for somebody and don't get caught. Now that's not literally in our book, but it's all over our book. If you're not looking for literal, you'll find that all through this big book. Get out of self, pay attention to somebody else, and we always like to say how sensitive we are. And it takes us, I know it took me a little while to realize that sensitivity to other people hurting my feelings was not the same sensitivity that we were shooting for. We're shooting for sensitivity, like it was said in the passage that I read from the big book, sensitivity to other people's feelings, their viewpoints, to listen to to their whole ideas without being spring-loaded to answer back or to try to win the argument over them, to make room for them too. And I heard a beautiful quote. I was reading a book the other day. It's by Rodney Smith, and it's called Stepping Out of Self-Deception. And one of the things he said that I've been chewing on and just sharing everywhere is that tolerance is a forgery of inclusiveness. And Bill always talked about good ideas being the enemy of the best. And what I'm learning here in Alcoholics Anonymous still all these years later, and if it's simplified even further, is that I let go, and then I let go, and then I let go some more, and then I keep letting go. And lest I be confused about having anything my way exactly. And then ironically, it doesn't mean that I don't speak up. It's just that I've learned how to speak up in a different way. And and in the course of steps 6 and 7 as well, I'll speak to this. And I'm spending this time on this because by the time I get to step 10, you know what I'm doing in step 10? I'm doing 1 through 9 all over again. There's not an element that's left out. When I'm practicing step 10, I'm just continuing. They said, oh, you like that? Well, then do that some more. Just keep doing that, what you just did. And why? Because it puts the first step at the end of that in the middle of page 85. It says, because alcohol is a subtle foe. Those are the stakes for us. So I remember why I'm here and in the context of the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then as a citizen of the world and a spirit walking the earth, then the rest of this helps keep me comfortable so the alcoholism stays arrested. It doesn't, bad feelings and resentment and those things are not the alcoholism themselves, but it will activate the alcoholism. It will activate it. And I like to make that clear just because in the practice of step 11, I found that we are not the only people who have resentments. And I know that it should go without saying, but we kind of because we spend so much time together and because it's so concentrated, this single purpose that we have, we can end up thinking that we're almost a different species from other human beings rather than human beings having a condition of mind and body that will kill us if I don't take care of my spiritual condition. But my spiritual condition is made up of the same stuff that non-alcoholic spirit is made of. We don't have special spirit. And, but I do need to take care of mine because the stakes are high for me if I don't, as an alcoholic. So I hope this makes sense. There's a lot in here, man. And I have a temptation to try to cover it all for you. I know I can't. And so I'm going to slow down and just try to do the best I can again. Just take a breath. So, so in steps 6 and 7, I'm gonna be looking at this. Steps 8 and 9. Step 8, becoming willing to make amends to those people I'd harmed. And there were some people I was more willing than others, and some people I understood to the depths of the harm that I had caused almost right off the bat. My daughter, I understood that. My husband at the time, something happened right away, and I had never been able to make direct full amends to him. And so I was glad I had that moment with him. And it was a very fleeting passing moment where I got to say something in brief, because I never got that moment again. But my parents took a long time, because there was still that old idea of, first of all, emotional immaturity enough to where I was still the small child, still angry, still, I come from the inventory I had didn't make me an alcoholic, but I still had the inventory when I arrested the alcoholism, right? And so that there was a lot of pride that was involved in making amends. And I made the direct amends to them, but I didn't change internally. It took a lot longer to change internally with my mother and especially my father, that it took a long time for me to change internally, even though the outer work was getting done. And I'm a big believer that the insides eventually can match the outsides. And it has in so many ways. And when we're talking about emotional sobriety, I believe that that's really where it is when the insides are matching the outsides. And I'm not just acting as if all the time. I don't want to act as though I'm okay with you. I want to actually be okay with you. I want there to be enough room where I'm not just tolerating, but I'm including you in life, in my consciousness. And that takes awareness. It takes awareness and practice of welcoming the things I like, the things I don't like. It's not good or bad. It's just stuff I'm comfortable with and other stuff I'm not, but it all belongs. And in that same thing over time, I'm not sure why I want to mention this, but when we come here, we're always talking about how I felt like I didn't belong, like as if that's some description of alcoholism, as if nobody else in the world ever felt like that, just us, and then, again, through the practice of the 11th step and reading other material, they're all talking about that, and what I've learned over time is that it wasn't that I didn't belong. It was that it was just fear. It was fear that was in the way. And that I really don't want to be just like you. I want to be okay in my place with you. And just like we don't need everything to be all mountains or all trees or all grass or all dogs or all cats or all the same kind of flower, you don't need a bunch of Carlas. We need one Carla, one Paula, one Dawn, one Bill, and to be set in that. To be able to acknowledge the great reality. The great reality is everything as it is, and it's perfect the way it is. And when I'm fighting with that reality is what causes the disturbance. Hobbling demands. I love that word, demanding. And it's not even anymore. After a while, we can hide that demand. We can smile in your face, but it's that internal condition where I'm like, I really want them to, I really need the approval of that one. Or, you can feel it in your solar plexus, when I've got this demand that you be different or that it be different or that, and so I have to pay attention to that. and just allow it to come to the surface so that it can be dealt with in the matter of my life, in the course of my life. I don't have to force it. I sometimes do have to take action. Step 6 and 7, I'm not just necessarily either just sitting around going, okay, let God take care of it, you know, whenever, like, oh, God must not care if I'm a jerk today. It's okay, because, you know, apparently I am. It's not like that. It's like rubber hits the road. I need to stay aware so that in this moment when I'm tempted and I can feel myself getting ready to be a jerk, I have a moment where I get to turn left and maybe not be. And, you know, restraint of tongue and pen many times, you know, can at least put that to a halt until, you know, but, and that may be the first step in the, you know, in that process of beginning to change internally. But, and again, I don't know, it hit me a few years ago that I know how to behave in a meeting. I know how to make you all think I'm okay, which was not the ultimate goal. But I thought it meant if I was okay and unnoticed and didn't get in trouble, that meant I was doing what I was supposed to do. And it wasn't matching the way I felt inside. Something was amiss there. And so I had to open it up for more honesty with, and I didn't have to be afraid of those feelings. They just, you know, I just made room for them. And it wasn't as bad as I thought. Because I really, when we're talking in terms of forgiveness or demanding that people be different, and then back in our inventory, I know that we, you know, we have the instructions on pages 60 at the bottom of 63 all the way to page 70 is our 4th step inventory. It's the map for our 4th step inventory, and the process of that. So we miss so much if we don't bother to read this book. And I guess, you know, part of my emotional sobriety was learning that I needed to read my own big book and that I could trust what I was reading. You know, it's really terrific to go through this material with somebody the first time, so they can point things out, and I can do this my 5th step with them and share this stuff. But I began to hear things in meetings that didn't match up with what I was reading in the book. I began to hear people talk about, say, you know, when we'd talk about resentment, we'd jump to the back of the book and they'd say, oh yes, I just pray for people for 2 weeks, you know, which is a great prayer. And when it's used the way I believe it's supposed to be used, what happens is it changes me, right? But what I began to hear, and I always feel like what I am hearing around me might be a living video with a little bit of a mirror for me, is that people were saying, oh yes, that guy's a real jerk. You know, I'm just going to pray for him. Well, good for you. You know, good for you and your self-righteous being, you know, like maybe if I pray for everybody, they'll all just, you know, come and live up to my demands again. Oh my God, now we're back in hobbling demands and I'm using prayer for my own selfish ends again. You know, that's not what it says in our, and I listen, even Bill Wilson himself said that this big book was not meant to be doctrine. It wasn't meant to be dogma. It wasn't meant to be, you know, it's a useful tool, and it points to a place. It points to a place where we can come to in ourselves. But it is, you know, he says it's not the be all and end all. And in fact, as I understand it, it's part of why he wrote the 12 and 12 was to take a little bit of the pressure off. However, the top of page 67, or actually the bottom of page 66, after he talks about how, you know, the importance of not holding resentment and what the stakes are for us again. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. And though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. They, like ourselves. Oh, so when I'm praying for that SOB to, you know, come and live up to my standards, you know, so hopefully he'll get well. Well, wait a minute. they like ourselves. And that changes everything for me. Oh my God. When I see somebody acting like I've acted, maybe they're afraid too. Don't I become selfish because I'm afraid? Don't I become self-seeking because I'm afraid of not getting? Don't I become dishonest because I'm afraid? I lie because I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of losing, afraid of not getting, whether it's emotional, spiritual, material. Hobbling demands, one more time, in power, counterfeit power. I get that little jolt of juice, and then back into step 6 and 7, it's like I'm ready to let go of something when I stop getting any kind of purchase out of it. And one of my sponsors, Marguerite, used to ask me, well, what are you getting out of that? What are you still hanging on to? Clinton Hodges used to tell a story about these monkeys in Africa where they were out and they'd set out these big long neck jars of M&Ms, filled with M&Ms, and these monkeys would come and they just reach their little hands into these jars and just grab a handful of M&Ms. And then but their hand would be full and fisted. So they couldn't get the hand out of their jar. So they were stuck to this jar forever. And the only way that they could get their hand out of there was to let go of the M&Ms. And so, what are my M&Ms in this life? What am I hanging on to? What purchase am I getting by holding on to some resentment, being unforgiving with someone? Is it, am I still looking at, and listen, it seems to come back in maybe less and less, or maybe it's more easily recognizable, or maybe even more easily relinquished these days, which for me, step 6 and 7 are just recognize and relinquish and surrender one more time. But first motivated by the pain of having them, and now having had a little bit of peace, that the internal peace that these surrenders have brought about, moves me on. It inspires me to continue this work. I came here because I had to, and I continue to do it because I like the result, because they're real results, and so making amends to, I had to pay the money back, and beginning to see the results of clearing up the wreckage of and mending these relationships, and them taking a long time. My daughter took from like the time she was 11 till she was 23, and all that transpired in that. And maybe one of the most valuable things I ever learned to say to her was, I was wrong, not the mom because I said this stuff, but because I was wrong. Or just telling her I was wrong, and being patient and persevering, and not being invested in the results. It had to be okay, whether she ever wanted a relationship with me or not. So even in learning how these steps worked in my life, I got enough of a result, even the first time through, and as poorly as maybe I did it, to know that there was something here. It was the bait, and it's a continued. I think we hear this, in all other kinds of spiritual traditions. They say if you see the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha. Anybody who says that they know it, run. And I think it's the same way here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We can get real pundity here with all this speaking stuff and the Zoom thing and the, getting out here, but really we're on the road, and I do know what it feels like to be right-sized. And so whatever has to go in order to be in that window, to be in that place, I'm willing to let go of, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time, and it may take some time, but I like that place where I don't have to know what the results are. I get up in the morning and I say my prayers, and I meditate, and from the beginning, I had a meditation practice. Well, let me just, before I skip ahead. Step 10 is this walking awareness, this walking, you know, and now so much more of the time it's a preemptive. I can feel when I want to be selfish. I can feel when I want to be self-seeking. I can feel when I want to nick up a compliment. I can feel when I want to be dishonest, and I can, you know, turn left before that has to happen much of the time. My 10 step is always better when I'm doing 11, and my 11 is always better when I'm doing 10. So I do them both. And so that's an ongoing thing that happens all throughout the day, and as does step 11. And that starts with a concerted effort, a focused effort. I sit and I make the time, and you know, and a lot of times people, they just can't stand the quiet. And I know in the beginning for me, it seemed like it just seemed like I couldn't bear the quiet for very long. And now I crave it. I don't know if crave is too strong a word, but I like where it takes me, and not just necessarily what happens sitting on the meditation pillow. That's not so much it. That's a willingness to be still, but it's how I am throughout my day. I'm more willing to pause. I'm more responsive than I am reactive. And not all the time. You can ask my husband, you know, sometimes I just need him to know how right I am. And but it's better. And I think for me, the practicality of all of this helped me. When we're talking in terms of emotional sobriety, it kind of scared me. I thought, ooh, what is this whole thing? But in all of my readings and all of my deep dives into all of this material, what it seems to me that I have is just a deeper relationship with this power greater than myself that I believed in when I got here, but I couldn't quite connect with. And you showed me how to arrest the alcoholism so I could have this. And there hasn't, since I was 9 months sober, there hasn't been a circumstance that has arisen where I've thought that a drink would make any of this any better. And that includes putting my daughter through treatment. She was 11 years old, and you know, she had a lot of trouble. And when I was 5 years sober, I was raped by an intruder in my own home, and that whole thing. And you know, the kinds of miracles that I get was not, you know, millions of dollars raining out from the sky. What they did was, in that trial, was what in essence was they did kind of a big public fifth step for me. They had a lot of the guys I'd known years before get up and testify as to who I used to be. And what we had to do was the boss where I was, my boss where I was working at this big firm at 5 years of sobriety came and testified on my behalf. And what we in essence proved was that the person they were talking about 5 years previous no longer existed. That was Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. So if I'm going to talk in terms of emotional sobriety, it's really what happens as a matter of continuing to take the steps. That's really all I got to keep coming back to this. You know, it's not a special school. It's continue to take the steps. That's what my big book never says, chill, you've done enough. It says continue, practice, improve, you know, keep going, don't stop. And then, of course, in step 12, to carry the message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all my affairs. And that means everywhere I go, not preaching, but demonstrating, allowing, being some kind of demonstration, not a cocky superiority, just part of, just being a citizen of the world. You guys enabled me to go out and learn to vote. And then you said, don't bring that back in here. We don't want to know how you vote. Just go out and do it. You said, go out there and grow your spirituality. Go anywhere you want to, study all the spiritual traditions or just one or whatever. Don't bring it back in here. We don't endorse or oppose any of them. We don't care. Just do it. Go grow. Go be out in the world. And he says that right here in this article too. He says, that where he says, to be a citizen of the world, we reconnect. This is the shoot, tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't leave Alcoholics Anonymous to do it, but tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous, you've made me a citizen of the world. And so, I'm happy with the practice. I love practicing being in this moment. And I don't always do it. And I feel the pain, or I feel the consequence of getting ahead of myself, or, starting to desire or think I know how something should turn out, but it's more readily relinquished. And if you're new here, it started with getting sober. It started with the first step, admitting, that I could get no further unless I was going to get sober. And in terms of our singleness of purpose and this particular fellowship, that's what it was. That's how I discovered a way of life that then reunited me with the world at large. A small part of a great whole that is Alcoholics Anonymous, that is a small part of a great whole that is the world of recovery, that is a small part of a great whole that is the world at large. And for me, that's the essence of emotional sobriety. And it's all in practical practice. Thanks so much for letting me share. I hope I get to hear from you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate your talk. Great job. And we ask that our person who shares call on a few people if you have anybody in here that you know and you're interested in hearing from. Or and then if you run out of folk to call on, I will be happy to pick up the ball for you.
Okie dokie. All right. Well, how about, I see my friend Bill Donaldson there, and I'd love to hear from you.
Well, hello, Carla. How are you? You look good. Thank you. Thank you. And say hi to Doug. I really appreciate being in a meeting like this. And I really appreciate the whole thing about emotional sobriety and this seeking. Lately, I've been talking with a lot of the people that I get to work with about what that seeking looks like and what it feels like at different stages of sobriety. In the beginning stages, seeking was anything, just help. I don't know. Some of the 3 hardest words for an alcoholic, right? I don't know, or please help me, right? And in the beginning, I didn't know what to do. So I'm crushed by self-imposed crisis that I can't postpone or evade, which is meism. And I can't get away from me because it's all over me and I need help. And at some point I have that first surrender. I don't know what to do. Please help me. Hopefully followed by, I'll do it. Oftentimes that doesn't come in for a while. And that was my case. And so I really appreciate the avenues that we get here. I pick up these avenues and these ideas from my fellows and people that have come before me. And they say, you know what? When I was doing that and thinking that, here's what happened. And it's experiential. If people preached at me, I didn't buy it. If they pointed their finger at me and told me I should, I didn't buy it. I couldn't or wouldn't listen. But when people talked to me from their heart, when they said, I did that, I felt that, I thought that, and here's what happened, then I could pick and choose. I go, you know what? And I used to come into the rooms of AA and I'd think, well, they don't know. They didn't go to places that I've been, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Anyway, so when I'm in that mode, I can't see beyond myself. And these people were patient enough and loving and kind enough to lead an example where I would listen to them and I would go, that guy was like me. He's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
Huh. What'd he do?
Yeah.
Right? And the hook was set. And then they would reel me in. And I think that's just kind of the way it still is at a bunch of years of sobriety, is I get led down different spiritual paths by different spiritual teachers at different times. And now I don't view anything as contradictory most of the time. I view it as, oh, isn't this interesting? And this position of neutrality came when it came. I couldn't make it happen. It came when it came as the direct result of taking direct actions. So thank you again, Carla. I love you.
I love you. Thanks, Bill. Thanks so much. I wonder if my friend Paula has any energy at all to share, and you please feel free to say no.
Thanks, Paul, alcoholic. It's not that I don't have energy. I just don't have the voice. But I just got so much out of what you said. It's a very emotional couple of days. But what I was thinking is, I outside life's going to show up, and outside life shows up. And these principles that you talked about tonight make it so life will show and I don't blow. But sometimes it's just hard stuff. And so I just was kind of watching myself not handle pain well, and thinking, I don't need to add the burden, it's already hard. I already lost, people and whatever. And yeah, even your voice is spirit soothing to me. So thank you so much.
I love you, my friend. Thank you. Gary Brown.
Thanks, Carla. Great to hear from you. You got me thinking about so many things that have been going on over a long time with that. You mentioned Clint, and every time I think of Clint, I remember the time he would ask me what I was going to do about that part of me that's never going to get it. And I don't know how many times he asked that, but I never got an answer for him, not yet. With that, so thank you so much with that. I think, at least lately for me, with the COVID and aging and all that stuff, it's kind of a different life. I still try to get up first and all that and spend some time meditating, I think of it. Sometimes it's just daydreaming, I think, and just not really working out with that. But the thing I've noticed now that I'm, I guess, the most delighted with is I've gotten to know a lot of people over a long time, and many of them are right here in town, and I've had good fortune of sponsoring them, or they're sponsoring me, and I think that's a blessing. Julie and I get along with some local friends very well, and we even get on with each other pretty well most of the time, and it's that. So love listening to you. Good to see you again. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Gary. Thank you. How about Mary Thayer?
Gosh, you just fed my soul tonight, Carla. Thank you so much. It was, I guess I would say I could follow your journey and how important these black lines in this book and kind of doing the drill type thing. All of a sudden there is a point, and I think Bill just said it about, you hit this place of neutrality in parts of your life, and I can't order it up, but it'll happen. It's, I live here right next to Tampa Bay, and I can't order the dolphin to get up and show me he's there until I open my eyes and I go, wow. I spent quite a bit meditating this morning on 6 dolphins that were out there. And I just was quiet because it brought me right into the moment and the awe of a presence that seems to be all around. And sometimes I'm just so asleep, I don't even see what is what. One of the lines you said tonight that I think I'm going to have to steal it from you. Okay. Is I'm not afraid of being of my fear. That's profound. And I remember when it was like I say, oh my God, look at how frightened you are. It was like there was another part of me that was saying, whoa, look at this. And I started to become aware of not being afraid of fear, seeing how it was. I had been motivated by fear my whole life. I didn't know what God wanted me to be. And it wasn't until what would you have me be if I wasn't being fearful? And to actually come to an understanding within myself as I read the book, I loved what you said, and pondered what is this really saying? It was like, you ask God to remove this fear and what you would be. And I would read that, but I one day went, I've never done that. I've never just sat still and said, well, if I wasn't being fearful, God, what would you have me be? Hence, for the first time after many years of doing this program, raised out there in North Hollywood with all those greats that you talked about. That's a great baseline out there. And I remember I finally heard what my sponsor's husband would say to me, but this time I experienced it when I really saw what that said. And when I said, well, if I wasn't being fearful, God, I'd be honest. And one of my patterns was I was such a great people pleaser, and that's based out of total fear, as you were saying. I was going to lose something I already had. Wasn't going to, be able to keep whatever I had, or lose it, or get it, or not get it, or whatever. And it was all self-centered fear. And and I can remember thinking to myself, well, if I'm being a people pleaser, my sponsor was kind enough to point out that meant that I was a phony, a liar, and dishonest. And I thought that was very harsh, but that was really true. And I saw where it said, well, let me be honest, maybe be curious, things like that. And for the first time, I really heard what that fourth step said. A fearless moral inventory. It doesn't say a fearful garbage inventory. What are my morals and where was I going against them? And that's when I started to hear and see what you referred to for myself, where it said a better demonstration of these principles in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And that's really those last 3 chapters, that nobody's around in the book studies for, the family after with the wives and, your job and stuff. Anyways, my husband would say to me, if your program isn't working in any one of those areas, it's not working. I just didn't understand what he was saying to me for so long, to understand that, am I being an honest person in my home, in my occupation, and with my friends and affairs or whatever? Am I open-minded? What spiritual principles am I demonstrating? Not necessarily preaching, as you said, but what am I doing? Can I be a better demonstration and not a promoter of this stuff? And so it shifted for me. It opened me up to seeing that fear had been my motivator. And as it shifted throughout the years in doing the deal, spiritual principles now takes an awful lot of strength. That's that 7th step prayer where it says, God, grant me strength to go out from here to do your bidding. And if God's bidding is for me to be authentic and honest, it takes a hell of a lot of strength. I had to ask for that strength this week with some areas in my life that if I left it unsaid, I would be a phony. I knew I would. In fact, one of my sponsors said, we're walking down the path with people. And as we're walking down the path, a pebble gets in the path. If we just step over that path and leave that pebble, and the next day there's another, and pretty soon you get a friggin' boulder and you can't get rid of it. And why didn't I bring this up? Because I was afraid I'd lose your respect if I told you the honest truth about whatever. So the strength and being able to do this a day at a time, I'm grateful for today. I don't want to arrive anywhere. Gary and I have had this conversation. Gary hasn't arrived anywhere. I haven't arrived. I just heard you say, I just continue to do this drill. It's kind of like a limitless thing. But in doing this, I wake up. I really wake up. And one of the things I've woken up, and I want to just make sure I can get this from you, is that I'm not driven by those fears because I'm not afraid of those fears today. Self-delusion, self-deception, what was it? Stepping out of my self-deception by who? Who was that?
Rodney Smith.
Spell it.
Rodney Smith, R-O-D.
Oh, Smith. Okay.
Yeah, Smith.
Okay, Rodney, thank you. I have found this to be exciting to kind of ponder how I create a story, think it's true, and then live my life. It's fascinating how this happens. And the only thing I can say is that usually when I just won't stand still and look at what is, I build a story, and that's fear. And those I pretty much say most of those stories I don't stay too long with, but I got some spiritual progress with it. But you know, I'm not done yet. I'm still a seasoned beginner. I'm still doing the drill, as most of us are. And it was a pleasure to hear you tonight. So great that these Zoom things, you get to see your fellow soulmates along the way. Thanks so much. Blessings to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
I see that there's a hand up. Dennis, Joanna?
This is
Yes.
Joanna. I'm an alcoholic, not a dog. And thank you so much, Carla, for your chair. I am totally with you when you say you have to practice these steps. That's the core of my recovery, are the steps. And you have to live them. That's how I was taught. And I really appreciate, and I want to tell you that there's a lot of appreciation from your fellow sisters and brothers in recovery. So at some point when you're not too busy, take a look at the chat, because there's a lot of positive messages there. So a lot of people got your message and appreciated your message. So thank you again for very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Would anybody like to share? I got some people I can call on, but I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Because I'm going to make sure Liz shares. Liz T. Yeah.
Are you calling on me now? Oh God, Liz alcoholic. You would think Carla would know better by now, because I'm just going to talk about how amazing and wonderful she is. Carla's been my sponsor for the last almost 9 years, coming up on 9 years. I've been sober since February 13th, 1988. And I've heard her like a lot on Zoom. And but this was definitely a very different talk. And what I heard tonight was when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And for me, that's who you've been for me. And you know, I had a little light bulb moment the other day. Carla and I meet every week on Zoom, and we actually were reading Language of the Heart for, I don't know how many months it took us to get through it, but we were meeting every week on Zoom. And you know, I live in Los Angeles. She lives in Tujunga, which, if you don't know the area, there's like 4 or 5 different freeways you have to take to get there. It's not that easy to just go visit her. So I've actually been able to see her a lot more on Zoom. And so I had this little light bulb moment the other day with her. And the Cliff Note version is, that part of the 11th step prayer where it says to understand rather than to be understood. I've had this, for those of us who grew up with record players and records, and the record would just get stuck, you know, in one spot. And that's kind of how it's been for me with my with my mother like my whole life. She's 92 right now, but it's been like that for a whole long time. And even in sobriety, I've just kind of struggled with not being able to accept who she is, and that she's not going to be Donna Reed, and that she is the mother that she is the person that she is. And I finally had this light bulb moment after doing some recent writing and reading it to Carla, where I was with my mother over the weekend, and it's just like, it just clicked, you know, to understand rather than to be understood. And you know, I've heard that, you know, for 33 plus years, but it just finally clicked, thank God, because you know, I still have my mother, fortunately, alive, and I can still work on that relationship, and I can see it in a whole different way now. And I think that's the biggest thing that I really get from Carla is when I get stuck, Carla has a way of opening my eyes and, you know, giving me that new pair of glasses, and I just am able to see things differently. And I am just so grateful for that. You know, I've been a really slow learner here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's taken me a really long time. And I'm grateful that that I don't have it all figured out, and that there's still so much more for me. And your share was like amazing and incredible. I don't even know how you talk for that long and just make sense and are cogent, and it was really wonderful. So really glad that I got to be here. And I know Paula gives an amazing talk. I hope you feel better, Paula. I've heard you before. So you guys are like twins though. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Liz. And you do so much for me. That's, you know, sponsorship goes, I think for me, sponsorship goes out. It's an exchange, and I get so much from my relationship with you. Thank you. Well, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to call Emerson. Emerson McGee.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emerson. I'm a recovered addict alcoholic. Thank you, Carla, for your share. This is the third time I've been able to hear you. And I get so much out of what you share. And I really appreciate the story you told about the monkey. And, you know, that is me. I mean, and I heard the story, it's a little more graphic, but, you know, the monkey's holding on to this stuff, to the candy. And the way I heard it, you know, the monkey can hear the hunters, these hunters, that's how they get the monkeys. He can hear the hunters coming up behind him, and he grips even tighter, and they're getting closer and closer. He's struggling more and more, still holding on. All he had to do was let go, but instead he's going to get beaten to death, you know, but because he won't let go. And that has been my experience, is that I seem like I'm only willing to let go once I'm just so beaten down by holding on that I don't have a choice to let go. And I think I believe one of the gifts of the program, at least for me, is and will be the ability to let go a little bit sooner and a little bit more often. And I like the way you said that, because you said that in a different way about the third step. Is I'm paraphrasing, I guess, but you said either letting go or surrendering, like every day, daily, 3 times a day, 5. You know, it's not a one and done thing, and it needs to be done over and over and over again. And the last thing, and I'm extremely grateful for this, is I love the way you said, you know, once we get into this program, we become responsible citizens and we go out and vote. And you said, but we don't tell people who we voted for, or we, you know, we have a spiritual way of life and we worship in a certain way, but we don't tell anyone. And I've been in some groups recently where they do tell those things. And it makes it really uncomfortable if you're not, for me, if you're not on the same page as them. And I believe, at least for me, I believe, in what I've read in the book, I think bears that out, is I believe that the way you said that is the correct way it should be done, not to either force by coercion or other things our views on other people. So I love hearing you. Again, this is like the third time I've had the pleasure, but I get so much from you, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emerson. It's good to see you. Kathy P. Perez, I see you.
Hello, friends. Kathy, alcoholic. Good to see you all. And Carla, thank you so much. I think I've heard you speak as well. And one of the things that I love is just the simplicity, actually, of our program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And surrender is a really good topic. And I like what you said too, as I went elsewhere, as we all, or most of us have done, beyond AA sort of, I don't know, language, to find more of my and deepen my spiritual practice. And I had a remarkable summer. Something really curious, a series of curious things happened. And I think it's the direct result of the spiritual work that I've been doing, especially deepening my meditation and doing some other things. Last springtime in this meeting, and it probably happened over the course of a month or so, 3 different people mentioned Michael Singer and The Untethered Soul. So I asked all my friends, have you read that book, The Untethered Soul? Do you know who Michael Singer is? And everybody was like, yes. I was the only one that didn't seem to know who he was. So I got the book and I devoured it. And I started practicing being the witness to my thoughts. And so if I could witness my thoughts. And so many of you know the circumstances of my life and recently. And I guess I will humbly say, though, I am the walking, talking example of the promises of Alcoholics Anonymous, that you can literally lose everything. When my house was lost and all my belongings in the Marshall Fire in Boulder County, and I have nothing but rubble that was once a home, like nothing is there, nothing. And so it's a curious thing to have nothing, but here I'm sitting on furniture that somebody provided, with kitchen stuff that somebody gave me, that food that somebody made for me, and that the community around me has just been remarkable. And I think the community around me isn't remarkable because I'm remarkable, it's because they're remarkable. And these aren't all just people in AA. What it is I think when we see somebody have an experience and no one actually can imagine, the unimaginable happened. My house burned up. I watched my house burn up on the news. There's videos of my house burning up and my street gone, and what that felt like to have my house fill up with smoke and be leaving, only to have it catch fire an hour and a half later. And so the drama of it is simply just that. It's a thing that happened. And so while I've had deep sorrow around that, one of the things that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is I do not have to run and hide from anything. I can be in deep sorrow, and I have been. I have had anxiety attacks. I have had, every day I cry. But it's not been so much. What's the phrase? I have never been given anything that God can't handle, including losing everything. And so what I am now is the example of how to lose everything and take one foot and put it in front of the other foot and put it in front of the other foot, and take one breath and then the next breath and say thank you, and say thank you for caring, but I'm too overwhelmed to accept whatever. So my tenacious friends just show up. They just show up with food. They just show up with clothes. They just show up with furniture. They don't ask. And so those are the people that have had it, because if you ask me, I can't make a decision. And so tomorrow, another tenacious friend went about, got office supplies for me, office from home. So I'm gonna go to her house and pick it up. Another friend got kitchen stuff. There's a soup brigade going on. Somebody's made some vegan soup for me. I have to pick it up. So I want to end with saying that what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is I only have to ever be who I am. And who I am now is a woman of God, that there's nothing to be afraid of, like nothing. If I could say there's nothing to be afraid of, there's nothing to be afraid of. When you lose it all, you find out actually you don't need very much. I have about 10% of the clothes I ever owned in a closet. Apparently that's all I ever needed. So it's wonderful to be anchored in my program. It's wonderful to hear somebody with a powerful message of AA. Thank you, Carla. Thank you all for listening. I love you. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, Kathy. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Thank you. Okay, I guess we got time for a couple more. How about Michael Romansky? And then I'd love to hear Dawn wrap it up.
Thank you. My name is Mike. I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be sober, and so grateful to be on this meeting. Boy, it's just my luck. I just started coming on this meeting. This is 2 weeks in a row I've been randomly called on. I'm just sort of going to repeat what I shared last week. Mitchell G was my sponsor for many, many years, and turned me on to this meeting. And this is like must viewing on Thursday nights. And I appreciate what I hear. I have to tell you, I've been in the program for around 20 years, and I stay sober for years at a time, and then I go out and my life blows up. I'm in one of those situations, right now where I wasn't honest about my drinking and drugging. I got caught. I'm out of a relationship. I'm living in a sober house. All of that, and it's a pattern that reoccurs every 5 years or so. And so I kind of feel like I'm on basic sobriety rather than emotional sobriety in some respects. I know that one of the real principles of, I've been going to meetings. I've never not been in 90/90, at least until the pandemic. I pray, but sometimes my prayers are rote. I talk with people in the program, but sometimes, how are you doing? And my answer is fine, okay. And I'm realizing that while I do some step work, my failures or my lack of progress has been more with the principles than with the steps. Am I open-minded enough? Am I willing enough? And most importantly, am I honest enough? I compartmentalize everything, and I want to be an integrated human being. And one of the things, I pick and choose, I put things aside, figuring I'm not going to get caught, or my people pleasing has me feeling like I'm going to end up hurting somebody or harming myself. And I need to work on rigorous honesty, 24 hours a day. And this, I want to get to where you people are. I want to get to where the speakers have been the last 3 weeks that I've been on these calls. And that's really got to start with my not just practicing the program, but really following the principles in all of my affairs. So anyway, thank you so much for calling on me, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mike. And Dawn, will you take us home?
Sure. I'll invite y'all all over to my home. Y'all can come. I really appreciate you sharing, Carla. And I love how you, wrap that right around the basic text of our program. And I can agree with what you said around, I just have to work the steps. I just have to do what I'm supposed to do here. And if I elect to do these basic things, I'm inevitably going to attain emotional sobriety. And I think what I've been hearing here is that we face life as it is, not as we wish it would be. And it comes filled with joy, pleasure, happiness, sorrow, tragedy, and everything in between. And today I was in the midst of having a conversation with somebody, and I was saying that the thing that I've learned, it's been very much impressed upon me over the past month, is that when fear doesn't exist in my life, if I'm not thinking about what might or should be happening. And so I've just kind of, it used to really kind of annoy me when Bill said we watch out for excitement in the book, because I thought, well, how boring would life be if we don't have something to look forward to? And now I'm starting to understand that when I'm getting, quote, excited about something, it's me living in the future. And that I have to watch out for that, because I'm missing right now if I'm living in the future. And when things happen in my life and from what I've heard this evening in other people's lives that make my present challenging, I becoming more emotionally mature, am able to sit in it and not run as fast as I can into some kind of future distraction, wishful thinking, self-pity because it didn't go my way, all the things that I am prone to. And inch by inch, step by step, year by year, day by day, it gets done. And I reap the benefit that y'all have told me it was going to happen. I've been told that you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. As a matter of fact, you're already okay. You just don't know it. And I really appreciate what I've heard this evening. Has just restated that for me in a pretty obvious way. I thank you, Paula. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. And but you got a few weeks where I'm already filled up, so it'll probably be about a month. But I'm coming for you. I'd like to take a moment that we do in here to go to our interior space where all of us have a very obvious neutrality, and be there and say the prayer that makes you most comforted. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Good meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. I love you, Paula. Thanks
Good to
for
see you, Carla.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone. What's up, Devin?
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Don.